Well, I'll tell you, it's been a week, hasn't it? We have watched the images from eastern Kentucky of homes, vehicles, fire departments, health clinics, livestock, and even people being washed away in the flood. In England, some Anglican bishops threatened to refuse to take communion from their Episcopal counterparts. Monkeypox has become yet another health crisis in the U.S. A large SUV sped through a Native American parade in New Mexico. It injured several people, but fortunately, nobody was killed. And yet again, someone opened fire in a shopping mall. This time, the Mall of America. Isn't that fitting? Although, thank goodness, nobody there was injured. The national news was so brutal this week that Ukraine was moved to the second and third pages of the newspaper. The gloom and doom are enough to make many of us just say, I can't watch, I can't listen, I can't even read about it. Our senses are overwhelmed, and yet in the back of our minds and in our hearts, there is this quiet assurance of safety and peace, of eternity. It's called faith. 3 things happened over the last week that at times brought upon me a sense of shame for the times when my faith wavers. And I think most of us would admit, or could admit, that there are times when our faith wavers. I was on my way last Sunday to visit an ill friend of mine, and I was driving through downtown Lexington, and I saw a man pushing a grocery cart. And that grocery cart was overfilled with blankets and pillows and little kids' stuffed animals and clothing, which isn't always an unusual sight in downtown Lexington. But behind that man was a little boy who might have been in kindergarten or first grade, and he was pulling behind him a child-size suitcase. And behind the little boy was a woman pushing a stroller with a baby in it. And at the end of that parade, there was a teenage girl. She had a long blonde ponytail, and she was pulling behind her a large suitcase that was obviously holding everything it could possibly hold. I drove around the block so that I could come up next to the man, and I stopped beside him and I said, "Can I help? Can I at least take your suitcases somewhere for you?" And he said, no, we're okay. We're okay. What a strange phrase to use. He said, we're headed to the Salvation Army building, just a couple blocks away, in the hope that we can find a place to stay for a few nights. He said he had been evicted from their apartment because they couldn't afford the rent. And they were just needing a place that they could all stay until they could find somewhere else to live. And it wasn't a big concern because he knew God would lead them to that place. So I did what I could do because I always carried Kroger gift cards in my glove box. And I always have a list in my glove box of places people can go to in Lexington that offer assistance. So I gave him all the money I had. I gave him some Kroger gift cards. Of course, I don't know how they were going to get to a Kroger's to use the gift cards. And I gave him one of those papers and I said, here are agencies. If you contact them Monday, I'm sure someone can help you. And then I said a prayer with that little parade of a family. And as I drove to my friend's house, I could not get that family out of my mind. And obviously, a week later, I still cannot get that family out of my mind. When I went to see my friend, let me give you a little background about him. His name is Walter. He knows I'm talking about him this morning. Walter has 2 types of terminal cancer. And I go visit him every Sunday. And our visits always begin with a little chat about what we did over the previous week. His usual chat says, I went and had a dose of chemo, I went and did this. You know, I did a couple of things in the house because it was rare to go with that steroid they gave me when they gave me the chemo. Mine was obviously a lot more varied for what I did the previous week. And then we turn to the hard work at hand, which is him telling me the things he has done during the week to make sure that when he dies, his life will be okay. Okay in that she knows where to send the insurance payments and when to send them, that she will be okay and that they have put a new alarm system in the house, that she will be okay because they have met with their financial person and she will be able to access money. So it will be smooth, he keeps telling me. I want it to be smooth. And then we plan. So today, I'm going with a document and we're going to pick out the readings for his funeral service. Because he wants this all done. It's hard work. And invariably, one of us ends the day in tears, or sometimes both of us. And then we share communion, and we pray, and we talk about what we think the next week is going to bring us. And before I go home, he says, you know, Paula, I am so blessed. God has given me this extra time to know that my life is coming to an end and to take care of my wife. God has given me a good life, a good career. God blessed me with the wisdom to be a physician. And this is all going to be okay because I know where I'm going. God's taking care of all of this. We're just along for the ride. I don't know if you happened to hear a piece on NPR Friday afternoon, but it was an interview with a minister from Farmers, Kentucky. And Farmers, I learned, is up near Moorhead. The minister related how the previous Saturday, he and 20 of his congregants prepared food for 400 people, and they made their way to Fleming Neon in Letcher County. He talked about the detour they had to take because the road had been washed away. And they set up in a parking lot of what used to be a store, and they started serving food. And in 30 minutes, they had run out of food. And the first food they ran out of was bread. And he said, just as they gave away the last of the bread, a red pickup truck pulled up. And in the pickup truck was a man from Powell County. And the man from Powell County said, I don't have much with me, but I've got a truckload of bread. And so they had a pickup truck full of bread. And the minister went on to say that every time they started to run out of food, another truck or a camper would pull up. And out would come people from Ohio and other parts of Kentucky and Virginia and West Virginia and Tennessee, and they all had food to serve. And by the end of the day, they served not 400 people, but 2,000 people. And the minister said on his way back to farmers, he said, I just kept thinking of the story of Jesus with the fish and the few loaves of bread and how he fed the multitudes. You know, faith is so much more than a belief that there is a God. It is trust that God has graced us and blessed us, that he has sought us out. Faith hopes looking beyond the immediate to God's future and our role in that future. Faith is tenacious. It's enduring. It's able to accept promises deferred in the belief that even death does not cancel out God's promises to us. Faith is indeed the conviction of things not seen, a conviction firmly held, but it is more. It is the substance, the essence, the very being of things hoped for. Ask a person who is in the process of ending their days here on earth. Ask the person who is losing a loved one or who has lost a loved one. And they hold on to that faith tenaciously. You know how strong a spider's web is, how strong that string is. And you find those people holding on to it with all their souls and all their minds. And yet faith is fragile and it's elusive. God does not necessarily give us what we believe, what we need in this life. But he gives us what Jesus has promised us. He gives us a place, an apartment, a house, a mansion in that kingdom that will have no end. Faith is future-oriented, trusting that God will keep his promises. God is always calling us into new life, into the future. It doesn't matter if we're 11 years old, if we're 30 years old, if we're 70 years old, if we're 89 years old. God still calls us every day into the future. In a nutshell, faith and hope are one. And the life of faith is a pilgrimage. It's a journey. And it's a journey that we walk with Christ by our side. Think about Abraham and Sarah. Abraham responded to God's call to him not with any expectations, just with obedience. Abraham sets off for a place that God has promised. He doesn't even know where he's going. He's just following where God sends him. Even when he gets there, the place is not really his to claim. Indeed, he and his children and his children's children travel as foreigners in that land. And yet they know, even though they live in tents and not homes, as Abraham had imagined, they are content to live doing what God has called them to do. You know, the faith of Abraham and Sarah was more than just right thinking. It was about right acting. It was about right doing. It was about them doing whatever God asked them to do. Because their faith is that God was good. Have you ever made cupcakes or anything that involves batter that has some leavening agent in it, like waffles or pancakes? Well, this past Friday, my granddaughters and I made cupcakes for the next door neighbor's birthday. And as always, I said, don't fill that paper cup all the way to the top. And the 4-year-old, being the logical one, said, well, why not? There'll be more to eat. And I said, no. What there will be is a mess in Monkey's oven. Because it will come out the top and it will go to the bottom of the oven and it will be smoky and stinky. Well, let me tell you. Make cupcakes with a 4-year-old child, and you will be reminded of the miracle of what a 350-degree oven and a little patience can do. The batter goes in, 29 minutes pass, and presto, cupcakes come out of the oven with their tops fully formed over the top of that paper wrapper. We have faith that that'll happen, right? So next time you try to wrap your head around faith, or you're worrying that you don't have enough faith, or you're worried about where did your faith go, just think about making cupcakes and trust that what comes out of the oven will look and taste even better than what went in. Frederick Beaker reminds us, faith is more than a process, more than a possession. It's an on-again, off-again thing, rather than a once and for all. Faith is not knowing how you're going to get where you're going, but it's knowing that you're going to get there with God by your side.